Howdy guys, it's Luke at Geek and Scenics, and in this video I'm going to use just foam and simple products to make something that's more than acceptable for minimum effort. Sit back, relax, and I'll catch you after this. So the foam that I'm going to use for this terrain to keep it simple is blue XPS foam. I bought this on eBay. It is about £37 and you get about an 8x4 sheet. It's 15mm thick, you can get it in all different thicknesses, but I thought 15mm because it'll fit the purpose that I'm doing it for. You can always put 2 pieces together or 3 pieces together depending on what you're building. If you're thinking that's quite expensive, for a small quantity of it, that's about the going price at the moment. If you do want it cheaper, you can buy it from bigger companies like Panel Systems, but you're going to be spending around £80 for a larger quantity. Whereas for small quantities, I spent about £40, I think it was £37.50 posted, and that gave me more than enough for a good few tables. I'll probably be able to get 4, maybe 5 tables worth of terrain out of this, if not more, depending on how dense I was going to do it. Now the first bits of terrain that I'm going to build is some like really large defense walls, like big concrete walls. I was going to build 6-inch segments. Now, when I actually lined the 6-inch segments out, they looked really small and really square or slightly rectangular, and I didn't like that. So I made them into 1-inch pieces that was about 8 inches tall, and that gave me some really sort of imposing big shapes that I could turn into wall sections. So all I'm doing is marking this out with a black permanent marker over 2 full strips, and then I'll cut this out later. So I cut the main bulk of that out with just a knife, just because you can't get big pieces of foam through your foam cutters. So I cut that down to a rough size, and then I used this foam cutter. This is a foam cutter that I bought from Robert off eBay. This foam cutter costs £30 on eBay. It's a very cheap bed cutter, and it's more than acceptable for the job. I've been using this cutter for a good 2-3 years. This is a brand new one that Rob sent me because mine was looking a bit worse for wear because it has took some hammer over the years, but he sent me a brand new one, and I do fully endorse this. If you're new to terrain building and you don't want to spend £100 on like a high-end cutter, these little cutters are okay. They cut the foam good enough. It would be nice if an MDF company or somebody made some awesome jigs for this, and any company that thinks they want to make some jigs for this thing, I will back them wholeheartedly. So any companies that cut MDF, if you want to make some jigs for this, I will promote the living hell out of them. So all I did was I throw this through the foam cutter just to square them off and make sure that my cuts were perfect. I lined all the cutting guard and everything up with just a set square, just so I knew that everything I was building was perfectly flush. Now one thing I will say, Robert does supply hotter wires for different types of foam and everything else. It's not a variable heat cutter. What I always use is the hottest wire that he does for these cutters, and this seems to cut blue foam, polystyrene, and all your other foams that you use quite regularly. It cuts them very nicely. It is the hottest wire that he supplies, and as you can see, it cuts through this foam at a decent speed. It's not overly melting the foam. It's a good accurate cut. Can't say accurate. It's a good accurate cut, and it's not overly melting the foam, and this is the hottest wire that it does for this foam cutter. So if you are buying it, make sure you do get a selection of wires to cut different foams to suit your needs. Now once I've cut all the bodies of the wall out, I need to make some triangular buttresses. The way I'm doing that is measuring about 3 inch in, and then measuring the height and the width of a wall section, just so I can find out a good triangular shape that's not going to look too big and stupid alongside the wall. So what I do is I sort of pre-draw this on and sort of guesstimate it. And once I've guesstimated it, I line it up with the foam wall that I've got, a line where I'm going to cut the top off for it to match, and then I simply just cut that out with a knife. And this is to give me the sort of master, shall we call it. And once we've got the master, we just trace round that multiple times so we've got enough to do every wall section that we want to do. And just keep flipping it upside down and the right way around and drawing as many as you need in so we can cut these out in a second. The main reason why I'm using a knife to cut out the main section rather than a foam cut is just because these large sheets of foam that are 4 foot deep won't fit on the cutter. So we'd cut out the main bulk with the knife, and then we square them all off and tidy the cuts up with the foam cutter after, so then you know at least they're all going to be identical. And as you can see, you set it, you just keep pushing it through, and you get very nice flush cuts every time. So you know your cuts are straight, you know your cuts are perfect. And then when you come to put it all together, nothing looks different, it's all identical cuts. Now with the walls being a foot long, buttresses either side look cool, but I want to put a buttress in the middle of the wall. It's a bit too long not to have any sort of central support. So the way we're doing that is that we actually cut the main buttresses down in half, and then we get an offcut to make it so we can cut down the centre of the triangle to make it half again, and that way we get two nice alternative little triangles that fit either side of the wall central. The way that we're going to pin that to the wall is just by using some paper clips. I would have used cocktail sticks, but I didn't have any, so I used paper clips for now. They worked quite well, but cocktail sticks do work far better. The glue that I'm using is just some high-grade PVA, which you can purchase from my store below, but any PVA will do. And then once I've put the PVA glue on, I just press in the paper clips. I put 2 in or 3 in depending on the length of the piece, and that holds it well secure and solid enough. Now, I repeat the process on the bigger ends, but one thing I did try was I left the paper clip more like a staple, and this made it pretty strong. I was actually quite happy with it, and it was easy to push in just by your fingers rather than having to use a blade edge or something flat to push it in. And before the glue had gone off, it was pretty secure. Now, I was sent this with the foam cutter. What this is, it's like a foam router, and you can put the wires in. Again, these come in different temperatures, and you just push them in and you can actually shape it into whatever shape you want and router it out. So to demonstrate that, I made a nice little heart. Love, love, love. And what I'm using this for is just taking the edges off. It's quite a cool little tool, and I think if I was to make something where I wanted to route out some trenches or cutting into hills, or maybe even taking out something like a battery, if I wanted to light something up with LEDs, I could router out an area. It's quite a cool little tool. But for taking the edges off, it worked rather well. You could use your big foam cut for that, you just have to take it out of its stand, and you could just do exactly the same with that. But with this, because it bent and it gived, you add a bit more of a natural flow and give to the foam. Now I seal all this over with PVA, and the reason I'm doing this is I'm going to coat it all in tile grout. Now this is for the sort of concrete texture, and the other reason I'm doing this is to add some more sort of rigidity to the foam. So it's not just for texture, it's for strength. I'm not a massive fan of foam terrain, because anybody that plays wargaming complains about how strong is something, how delicate is something. Foam to me is quite a delicate terrain piece, so I'm trying to make it as hard as possible. And how I do that is I cover it in tile grout and then wait for the glue to go off, and then we dust off the excess, and then you're left with a really fine stone-like texture. This is very messy though, so make sure you put something down, not your dog. And just make sure you clean up after yourself after doing it, because it does get absolutely everywhere. I love the way tile grout looks on foam when you put it on this way. I've used it for Mottle and Daub, I've used it for sandstone finishes, I use it for rendering all the time. One, because it's super fine, it gives you that sort of subtle texture that's not overpowering like you'd get from sand, and it also adds quite a lot of protection because tile grout is more or less a cement. Now, you can spray foam with spray cans. Watch a great video from Jeremy from Black Magic Craft and he explains how you can do it. It's very simple to do, you just got to know how to use your spray cans. But for all you naysayers that don't believe that, if you put tile grout on, you could literally spray this as hard as you want with a spray can and it's not going to melt it. This will protect it. Now, how I'm spraying these is black undercoat and then I'm using a grey-blue spray paint over the top, just a slight dusting, and then I'm concentrating on the largest flat areas in the centre. And then we just hit them with a white paint on top, and then you sort of get most of the work done for you. When we come to weathering these, you'll see how all this spray paint work comes together later. Now, because I've done the buildings, I'm wanting to make some quick and simple sort of little tanky traps or like defences for your soldiers to sit behind. Just some nice obstacles for your terrain. Now, the way that I'm making these is more or less exactly the same way that I built the big walls. I'm just making them half the height of a model. So if your models are 30mm, make them 15mm. And I make the edging pieces, the buttresses, exactly the same. The only thing that I don't do for these is I don't do the central buttresses, and I'm cutting the edges out of 5mm blue underfloor polystyrene. You can buy this on eBay for about £3-4 a sheet, pretty cheap. And I follow the same principles and just copy the style so it fits in with the rest of the terrain. Now, what battlefield wouldn't be without some barbed wire obstacles? I don't know the proper names, but you can buy out styrene in all sorts of shapes and styles. I'm actually missing some H-type styrene, so what I'm doing is sticking two U pieces together to build some iron girders. Now, I'm making these quite oversized. Now, it's Warhammer 40,000, so there's ogres, there's orcs, there's big things, so they're not just stopping men, these things are supposed to be stopping inhuman objects. So doing things pretty large and oversized looks kind of cool, and it makes them a lot easier to make. If you want to make these in scale for bolt action, just do this with smaller pieces. And all I'm doing is cutting them down and making a cross out of the H-bar or whatever you want to call it. So you get like a nice cross. Once you've built the cross, this is now one side. I'm building two of these, so just make 4 of them. Find a drill bit that's the same thickness as a piece of dowel, and drill through the middle of your crossbars so we can thread the dowel through them. Once you've figured out the length that you want them, just trim that off with a razor saw or junior axe saw, whatever you've got laying around, craft knife even. Now, don't do what I do and stick this in place, because we need to thread the barbed wire on, which you'll see the issues with that later. Now, the barbed wire that I'm using is shop bought stuff, but you could buy this in bulk. It's called dual core security wire, I think it's called, or you could make your own. I'm not happy with how small it is, so I wrap it around a paint pot to give me that wider, bigger sort of to fit the scale of what I'm building. And as you can see, because I've glued it on, I'm trying to thread it over and it's a pain in the backside to get on. So what I actually do is break the seal of the super glue and then bunch it all back together and then thread it onto the trap, tank trap, obstacle, whatever you want to call it, and then super glue it in place. Now, the wire acts like a spring. It's going to pop up and bounce everywhere where you don't want it, so just super glue certain areas where you want to keep it down, and then once you've got these super glued in place and you've used the activator so it goes off quick, you can just sort of press things down and sort of mess it up to give you the look that you want. Otherwise it does go a bit wild and it just springs up all over the place, and you find because the plastics are very light, it just pushes it up into the air and it doesn't look great. So super glue certain areas that have been obnoxious down. Now, I did try and do the same to the second one, but I broke it doing that. but one broken one looks kind of cool. Now for painting, all I'm doing is very similar to the walls. I'm spraying them black, then I hit them with like a browny red sort of rusty red sort of look from a distance. I don't go too heavy with this, and then just on the barbed wire and the edges of the crossbars, I just spray that with a bit of metallic silver. I don't go overboard. Now I'm going to be building a board just to display these off. I mean, I was going to keep these as sort of modular pieces, but I thought why not just build a board to show you what they can look like just on some sort of easy quick board. Now to get a nice natural landform, I burn the polystyrene first, and to smooth all that out so it doesn't look too unnatural, I use the Geek Scenics modelling compound. This goes off very quickly and you can build up sort of hills and outcroppings and areas just using the compound. And then if I want any sort of rocky outcrops, I just push in some bark pieces just to simulate sort of rock face and everything else. These bark pieces can be purchased from the links below, so if you are interested in any of them, just click on the links. Now ground covering and everything else, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know I don't like to mess around. Ground covers, I want them to look natural, so the way that I do that is I just paint it brown and then I chuck down some PVA glue. I brush that in so you get a nice good covering of PVA everywhere. Then just get a bit of water on your brush and brush that everywhere. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you know my favourite ground covering is literally soil, grouts and pigments. Now the reason I like this is 1, it's very natural, 2, it dries as hard as nails once it's been sealed in place, and 3, you can actually use it to weather things because weathering is the dirt and the crap that's around on the floor, so brush it up onto your terrain. And then using your Scenics sealants, just spray seal that all in place. Now for pushing in your defences and everything else, if this were modular you wouldn't do this obviously, but if you are doing like an Armies on Parade display board or anything else, doing things like this do go a long way. Just pile up the ground cover around the base of all your terrain pieces and everything that you're putting on. It looks like they've been there a while. Lay it all around them and then just spray and seal it in place like you did exactly with the ground cover. For weathering and painting and dulling down the walls, I'm just using a black ink mixed in with some acrylic medium and water. I paint that on thickly so we've got a nice good covering, and then what I do then is I just get some water on a brush and I brush the water on over the top. This is just take the harshness out, and you do get some sort of droplets like rainwater and weathering. Once I've done that, I sort of pick some areas out where I want sort of dirt and stuff to fall down the wall, and I let that run naturally and then just repeat the process with the water so it's not too strong in contrast. Now some really easy extra details. I printed off Google some really high-res quality posters from 40k. They were terrible, but they do look good on a model once they're shrunk down and everything else. And now I blend these in after sticking them on with just some PVA glue. I get some brown weathering powders and I just chuck it on and just dust it all over the place. Weathering powders, if you want terrain to look good, just throw weathering powders on things. Literally just get them and throw them about everywhere. And as you can see, once you've thrown some weathering powders around, your terrain just comes to life. Everything looks dirty and grubby. If you want to seal that in place, just use some spray varnishes and that'll give you the looks that you want. And yeah, it blends your posters in and looks like a war zone. So guys, I hope you've liked this video. Just using some foam, a bit of dowel and a bit of styrene, you can make something that's pretty impressive and not overcomplicated. This is just squares and triangles glued together and roughed up with some spray cans and weathering powders, and you get something that looks pretty decent. So guys, if you've liked this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. If you want to support me, do check my shop below where you can buy all the materials used, and if you're interested in the foam and the wire cutter and everything else, I've put links below as well. If you want to support me any other way, do check all my affiliate links to like Element Games, where you can get your Games Workshop and all your other sort of wargaming necessities from them, and I get a cut and it doesn't affect your pocket. So thanks for watching, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you again for the next video. Love, love, love.